The following video has been brought to you by RYN Studios. Release your nerd. Hello everyone, my name is the King of Clubs, and welcome to another episode of List It. In this episode, I'm actually responding to a request for a video to be done. Someone had asked me to do a video on my top 10 favorite wrestlers of all time. Now, I've been watching wrestling since as far back as I can remember. Since I was really young. Now, because of this, I've watched wrestling for so many years that I can't pick just 10 wrestlers to make a list out of. So what I'm going to do is actually make a series of videos, usually anywhere from 3 to 5 videos, and make lists based off of that. So the first series, or the first video in the series, is going to be on wrestlers from what I call the classic era of pro wrestling. To me, classic era is anything before the Attitude Era, so anything before 1996 is going to be on this list. Now, I know there's a lot of wrestlers that are going to be on this list that have spanned through other eras, but I'm focusing mostly on when they first hit their the first big point of their career. All right, so let's go ahead and begin the countdown with number 10. Number 10 is the team known as the Natural Disasters. The way that this list is going to work as well is that anytime I have a tag team, I'll enter it as one spot for both members of the team, rather than take up 2 spots for 2 individuals. The Natural Disasters will be the first example of this. They are made up of Earthquake and Typhoon. These were 2 bigger guys who wrestled in the late 80s, early 90s for WWE. I was always impressed by them just because, for being 2 larger guys, aside from using their strength, they actually had a little bit of speed to them as well, which is always cool to watch in pro wrestling, is to see a bigger guy able to move. So yeah, I was a fan of the Natural Disasters at a couple points. Obviously, they weren't always fan favorites, but I just always were impressed by how fast they were for being bigger guys. Alright, moving on to number 9 is the Legion of Doom, also known as the Road Warriors. Hawk and Animal are arguably the most popular tag team of all time, being one of the most decorated of all time as well. They won championships in virtually every organization that they competed in, and were widely respected by everyone that knew them. They are one of the tag teams that actually span into the Attitude Era, but I'm keeping them on this list because they made themselves really well known in the Classic Era. In the time that they got into the Attitude Era, they were already legends. So that's why I'm basing them in this list, because this is when they really got their first big hits. Alright, moving on to the next spot is Demolition. Number 8 is Demolition, which is made up of Axe and Smash. They did have a third member known as Crush, which was Bryan Adams, but this is focusing mostly on Axe and Smash. They were probably my favorite tag team to come out of the Classic Era. They were just 2 guys that used brute force and loved doing double teams, which is part of the reasons why I actually really enjoyed watching them, is just their brutal tactics that they chose. They did have Mr. Fuji as their manager for a while, until he betrayed them and left him for another team. But even then, watching the team of Demolition was always entertaining for me. Alright, moving on to number 7. Now this is when I start getting into more individuals. Number 7 is Roddy Piper. I've always been a fan of villains almost as much, if not more, than the heroes. Piper is an excellent villain. He's gotten to a point now to where he is such a respected legend that anytime he shows up, people can't help but cheer. And it's funny because he's made a career out of being the bad guy to Hulk Hogan, which I always thought was cool, that no matter what, whether Hulk Hogan was the good guy or the bad guy, which he was usually the good guy, Piper was always there to be his enemy. And that made for some really good storyline and some really good matches. I also liked the fact that Roddy Piper started this chain of having talk shows on the wrestling show with his show called Piper's Pit. This later on spawned into other shows like the Brother Love Show, the Barbershop, the Funeral Parlor, even other shows like Heartbreak Hotel, the Cutting Edge in later years, Peep Show with Christian, and then Chris Jericho had his little show as well, the highlight reel. So Piper was the pioneer for that, and it was always entertaining with how his shows would break down, because much like a contract signing in the WWE, episode of Piper's Pit was very rarely peaceful. Alright. And moving on to number 6 now is Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. I was always a huge fan of Ricky Steamboat. He is what I call the universal good guy, because I cannot honestly remember a time when he wasn't playing a good guy. He always had kind of this Bruce Lee themed gimmick, but it was always entertaining to watch, and he had some of the best matches ever. In fact, one of the best WrestleMania matches of all time, in my opinion, was his match against the Macho Man at WrestleMania 3. That was always cool. There's a lot of really good wrestling involved in that, and there's the right type of build that went into that matchup, which you don't see a whole lot anymore. So yeah, Ricky Steamboat, the universal good guy, like I said, I honestly don't think he ever played the role of a villain, and that's not a bad thing. There are some characters that never play the role of a good guy, but it's always the entertaining part, is always having that type of dynamic. Alright, moving on to number 5. Number 5 is The Undertaker. Now, The Undertaker is one of, I think, maybe 2 characters that I can think of that span through all 3 sections of eras that I'm going to cover in this video series. So I'm going to cover the classic era, I'm going to cover the Attitude Era in another episode, and then later on I'm going to cover what I call the post-Attitude Era, which is pretty much anything from 2001 to present day. The Undertaker is able to span through all 3 of those groups, but I'm focusing on him in the classic era because that's where he started. And if you think about it, The Undertaker came in on top, because when he showed up in 1990 at Survivor Series, he came in, just demolished an entire team at the first Survivor Series, and then a year later he faced Hulk Hogan for the title and won. So within a year he became world champion, which is pretty impressive, especially for that time frame, which not very many people were able to claim. But yeah, The Undertaker has had a huge legacy. He still competes at WrestleMania. He competed this year, which I was happy to see. I was even happier with the fact that this year he looked to be a lot healthier than he did the year before. When he lost to Brock Lesnar, to me he looked really thin and sickly, like he had lost a great amount of weight. This year he looked like he had put on the weight and the muscle back, and he just looked a lot healthier, a lot better. He still is getting, his age is starting to show more and more though, so I don't know how much longer he wants to keep doing WrestleMania, but he seems to enjoy it as much as he can. So I have a lot of respect for The Undertaker. Moving on to number 4 is the other character that can span through all 3 of these, and that is Sting. I'm placing him in the classic category because, similar to The Undertaker, he started out really high in his career. If you think about it, WCW referred to him as the franchise before the Attitude Era started. So if you take the title like the franchise and you push him even more in the Attitude Era, then that basically turns him from a franchise player into a legend right then. And now he is just this wrestling icon, this legend of legends. He is so well known and so well respected that it is just unbelievable. I know that there are rumors circulating that he's going to be facing The Undertaker next year at WrestleMania. It's a dream match that a lot of people would like to see. I think it'd be really cool if Sting decides to stick around long enough to do it. I know that he's eager to work with WWE longer, as long as they have ideas to throw at him. I just hope that the WWE doesn't try to turn him into a joke like other companies have in the past. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with him. But yeah, he started out really high points as well. Like I said, if you're called a franchise player before the Attitude Era, then that means that you are the guy to represent the company. Which is really saying something, because not even Ric Flair, who was the world champion for most of that time, was called a franchise player. So that really speaks volumes to me. Moving on to number 3 is Hulk Hogan. Now, being that I grew up in the late 80s and then on to the early 90s, Hulk Hogan was one of the first wrestlers I saw because there wasn't really the type of reception that we had. We didn't get very many channels. We didn't have cable back when I was growing up for a long time. So we only had a few channels to watch at a time. And so I didn't get to see like the main event or any of the old wrestling shows before they started having Raw and SmackDown, these other weekly shows that you see nowadays. So with Hulk Hogan, he was one of the first wrestlers I saw because we would go to the video store and we'd rent the pay-per-views after they came out on video. This is back when we had the VHS, which they pretty much don't exist anymore. I mean, it's very rare that you'll find a VHS anywhere now. But yeah, back then we would watch VHSs. We'd go rent the pay-per-views, and Hulk Hogan was one of the first wrestlers I saw. And naturally, with his explosive personality and the bright red and yellow ring gear that he always wore, it caught a little kid's attention. That's the thing with me, is I gravitate to someone that caught my attention, which is also what led into the number 2 and number 1 spots. They were people that caught my attention really quickly. Hogan I've always liked. Even when he became a bad guy with the NWO, I still liked him. In fact, in some cases I actually liked him more as a bad guy than I did as a good guy, because it was a direction that he hadn't been taken at all. That was WCW at one of its finer points, when it said, hey, let's do something that no one's ever thought of. Let's make Hulk Hogan the bad guy and portray him as a villain. And it worked really, really well. Let's see. Moving on to our number 2 spot is the Ultimate Warrior. Here's another character that caught my attention really early on with his explosive personality, his very, very bright and colorful ring attire. I think part of it is he would go on these rants, and they didn't make sense. Even now watching them, they don't make any sense to me at all. But it was just, he had so much energy. He was always so pumped up when he made these rants that it's just like, okay, I don't know what you're saying, but it just sounds cool. So awesome, I'll cheer for you. The Ultimate Warrior was always entertaining to me, and I was sad the way that he had left the company and left most of pro wrestling for a long time, with this bitterness that the WWE had portrayed him with, because they made that horrible video that just pretty much bashed him the entire time, and he hated that. So when he finally got inducted into the Hall of Fame, they were able to right some wrongs, and they've made amends. Unfortunately, he did pass away a couple days after being inducted, so that's kind of the sad part of it. But in response, they have made progress. They've made making things right. Warrior was always a character that I was entertained by. Moving on to number 1, the number 1 spot is another character that's similar to the Ultimate Warrior, very colorful, very high energy, and that was the Macho Man. Macho Man Randy Savage was a guy that I always liked, even if he was a bad guy with the NWO, even if he was a bad guy just on his own. I was always entertained by him because he came up with these creative ways of putting things. I mean, he would rant kind of like the Ultimate Warrior would, but his rants would actually have a point, and they would make sense, and they'd be relative. They'd have a theme. If you go back and watch some of his old interviews and promos from like the late 80s, early 90s, back when Rosalyn was really starting to gain some airtime, get seen on pay-per-views and events, he would come up with these very clever ways of making fun of his opponents. Like one episode, or one promo, excuse me, that sticks out in my mind is he was talking about, I think, Tito Santana. It was either Tito Santana or Ricky Steamboat, I'm not sure which one. But his whole promo, he was trying to make a point. And so what he did is he came out with a plastic trash bin. And when Jericho was interviewing him, he asked him what was with the trash bin. He said, and he pretty much said, he says the trash bin is for my opponent. I'm going to say Ricky Steamboat in this case, just for reference points. Him saying this is for Ricky Steamboat because he's nothing but garbage, and that was kind of his whole premise of the interview. The promo was to make the theme being that his opponent was garbage, and he would do stuff like that. He'd bring small props, and like there was one where he did yesterday's newspaper, where he actually brought the newspaper from the day before from a newsstand, and just little stuff like that, which is always funny. I liked how colorful he was. He had some of the most flashiest, colorful, and sometimes even outrageous looking attire and costumes, but it was always, to me, it was always cool. Always awesome to watch. And he was just always so entertaining. So yeah, that's this countdown for top 10 classic era wrestlers. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to like, favorite, share this video. Leave comments in the section below as to what you guys think. Who was your favorite classic era wrestler? Now be sure to leave wrestlers that were big anytime before 1996. Like I said, this is closely focusing on the classic era. The next listed video that I'm going to post here in a few days will be for Attitude Era, so we'll move onward in the chain. Yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe to my channel for more videos. And also check me out on social media. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and Snapchat. I have them all synced up to my phone, so anytime you guys message me, I'll be able to see that on my phone shortly after you guys post it. That's it for this video, guys. Have a nice day.